It's time for Past Access, a barrier-free tour through history. Now, here's your host, Pete Coleman.
Welcome to Barcelona. This is Past Access. I'm Pete Coleman, your host, to take a tour of a wonderful city that you have to hit, full of history, full of culture, and a lot of fun. Stay tuned. We've got a great show on tap for you today.
Year after year, Barcelona draws throngs of tourists towards this vibrant city. From above and from below, the historic Barcelona can still be discovered. Woven within the Catalonia tapestry and cemented in the avant-garde structures to faith. Barcelona and her people are full of surprises, scenes of beauty, and a land of epic history and traditions. So where do we start with all this talk of beginnings of Barcelona? Well, like most beginnings, we start with the legends. Some say this area of Spain was influenced by one of the ancient world's greatest Mediterranean powerhouses, the Carthaginians. In 230 BCE, hardcore soldier pioneers from North Africa forged a new home in Iberia. They say credit belongs to the founding father of the city, Hamilcar Barca. You remember him. The hard-nosed Carthaginian general that stuck it to the Romans, and more notably, was the father to Hannibal, who carried on the family tradition of Roman beatdowns in this Second Punic War. But alas, this story may not be true, as the Carthaginians never really settled as far north as present-day Barcelona. In another legend, the story that I like the best, deals with Jason, his Argonauts, and Hercules himself establishing Barcelona. You see, during their voyage to find the Golden Fleece, the Argonauts had lost one of their 9 ships off the coast of present-day Barcelona. Hercules was given the task to find the ship, but instead found her crew beached on these very golden shores. Hercules then named this area Barcelona, in other words, the 9th ship. Nevertheless, the city known as Barca was created, and later named Barcino by the Romans. Their imperial fingerprints are found throughout this modern city today.
All right, so this is really going to be cool because we're going to go down this street here, and we moved away from the very busy street in the intersection from where the hotel is, and we're going to go just a little about 200 yards, like I said, and we're going to go right over here to the left. And when we go right through here, you'll see that we're going back into time. We're going right into this alleyway, and if you can take a look down this alleyway right here, this is where the city walls of Old Barcino started, precursor to Barcelona. The Roman fortifications are still here, and we're going to take a look past the trash and the dumpsters and some of the other stuff, and we're going to actually go back in time. So come with me.
This Gothic Quarter is a mixture of the new and the old. Strange bedfellows for sure, but also a unique juxtaposition of eras on full display.
All right, so it's a little hard to believe, but we're actually just in the middle of a little courtyard here that has grown up around the city for the past several hundred years in some form or fashion. And you can see that it's, it's just a normal place. But if you kind of pan back this way behind me, you'll see the tower that was built in Barcino. And around 218 is when the Romans were kind of moving through here and really making this place a little bit more fortified against various issues of attacks and whatnot here in what would become Barcelona. And as you go through the city streets, you're going to see some of these walls here, bits and pieces, but this is probably the most well-preserved area here. It's just a tiny little park, and we're going to take a look around and see what it looks like from the other side. So up on the hill here, to get a better angle of looking at the eastern defenses of this wall that's still left here in the middle of the city of Barcelona. Back in the 4th century, this city was the second most outer wall of the entire Barcino, the city encampments. And for good reason, they built this wall even better than they had before, because when the fall of the Roman Empire happened, the Visigoths from Toulouse came in and sacked the city and took it for their own. Then Charlemagne came down after the year 800 to take it for the Franks, and that's where it kept for quite some time into the Middle Ages. This is a very busy city area for many reasons, as you can tell, but like this guy. But it really is an amazing thing to see that history is still kind of a living thing in the backdrop for a lot of people living here in the middle of Barcelona.
Sure, the history and culture are rich here in Barcelona, but there are times when both come together in the form of good food. In our case, it's time for tapas, with a side of historical context.
So when walking around and rolling around Barcelona, you need to stop and get something to eat. There's so many amazing places to eat here, from steaks to seafood to seafood. It's fantastic. If you need something that needs to kind of fix the low blood sugar, go to a tapas restaurant, get a cerveza, get a beer, and maybe get something like, calamari, which I have here, which is fantastic. It leads me to think a little bit more about what are some of the great tastes from Barcelona, especially historically. There was something called garum that was known in the Roman era, which was one of the most expensive piece of food additives you can get. And that's really something to talk about as appetizing over maybe the food I'm about to eat here today. But garum was basically fish intestines that were fermented in a barrel. And liquamen was actually the term that was used, which was kind of an oil based from that distilling. And you would use it, and any Roman worth his salt would have that on his table. And you would dip bread into it, you would cook with it, you would make dishes with it. We don't have it here today, but I hear it is actually very good. Think of it as an ancient MSG, if you will. It would have been sold and eaten here in Barcelona for sure during the Roman era, when this is called Barcino. And that would have been on every table. Here we're going to just deal with a little bit of olive oil, maybe some vinegar, and enjoy these tapas. If you can, take the time out to eat here in Barcelona. Gastronomically, this place is really on a high level, and you can find some great food here in town.
Back on the trail to discover Catalonia's history, we push to the old harbor area known as Port Vell and the Museum of History of Catalonia. Housed in one of the only remaining 19th century portside warehouses, this museum has it all, chock full of interactive historic exhibits from the Stone Age through present times. It also offers a restaurant and bar rooftop overlooking the harbor.
As you come in through the prehistory area and go into the Bronze Age of this museum, you get an idea about this area of Spain and how important it was for so many various different peoples and empires. It goes back and forth quite a bit. You can definitely see this was a very needed area for transportation, shipbuilding, trade, especially. A lot of trade routes come through here in Barcelona. And as we go through this, we'll see some more of the impact of the Middle Ages as we get closer to the time that we are in now.
Discover medieval jobs in Catalonia and witness the 17th century peasant uprising that led to the Reapers' War, shaking up the caste levels of the day. By the early 1700s, Catalonia's independence comes to a bloody defeat at the hands of King Philip during the War of Spanish Succession. As the tumult of the 20th century looms ahead, the interwar years produce the heavy emotional scars of the Spanish Civil War and the fascist reign of Francisco Franco. Ideology and symbols hang from the walls, but what catches my eye is the story of the flag of Catalonia. The vexillologist in me cannot resist the legend of the symbol of modern-day independence. You see these emphatic colors throughout the city, hanging from balconies, emblazoned with the Barcelona's football crest, and in the hands of protesters. But don't confuse these two separate flags, known as the La Señera and the Estelada. The current flag of Catalonian independence from Spain is the Estelada, sporting the blue triangle and the white star. The more ancient alternating red and gold striped flag, the Señera, is one of the oldest flags in Europe, representing the Kingdom of Aragon. Legend has it that the La Señera pattern comes from the 9th century, where the Count of Barcelona, Wilfrid the Hairy, that's right, Wilfrid the Hairy, was injured while helping the Frankish King Charles the Bald in a battle against the Normans. The king soaked his hand in Wilfrid's wound, taking his 4 bloody fingers across Wilfrid's golden shield as a mark of gratitude. The red stripes are known as Els Quatre des de Sang, meaning the four fingers of blood. This legendary story surely matches the passion the Catalonia people have with this trusted symbol. We leave the museum and push several kilometers to the quiet tree-lined plaza of Barceloneta. It's time to take it easy on this autumn day.
Remember, you don't want to just keep passing things on the side of the road and just keep going from one destination to another. Make sure you turn your head around a little bit and look around and see some of these little tucked away plazas throughout the city of Barcelona. They're nice little jewels to take a stop, get a cerveza, and then continue on someplace else. This little place right here is one of my favorites so far in Barcelona, and it's called the Plaza de la Barceloneta. And Barceloneta is a nice little, once a fisherman village that's on the strip here between the Mediterranean and the inlet, and the quaint little villages here. So remember, take in the sights. This is a town that is made for that.
For me, the best parts of traveling is taking in some time to admire the new surroundings and trying new things. The beachfront cafes and local watering holes provide just that, and more. It's autumn here, but still warm enough to have a cold drink in hand and do a little people watching. Whether your weapon of choice is a pina colada, a famous fruit-filled glass of sangria, or my choice for the afternoon, vermouth on ice, you would be hard-pressed to have a bad time here. A cold glass of vermouth seems to be the most popular in-drink these days in Barcelona. It's not a hard drink to find on the tourist track, and it's definitely a pretty simple drink to make. Basically, it's a caramel-laced white wine with several taste variations, normally served on ice with a couple of olives and an orange slice. Today, I'm drinking the vermouth Lustau on ice. It's usually good to pair this sweet drink with pickled items or salty tapas. You know, 2 p.m. seems to be a good vermouth time around this town, so remember to take that needed break, like we're doing right now, to recharge the old batteries. The long-awaited tour of the Gothic Quarter is upon us. This is the epicenter to our historical tour of Barcelona.
So the Gothic Quarter is actually the oldest part of the city that's pretty well preserved, and it's something you have to hit. If you're in a wheelchair, it's going to be a struggle. There's going to be a lot of cobblestones, there's going to be a lot of dips and bumps that you're going to have to get over. Having a freewheel or some extra large pneumatic tires in your front casters will be very helpful. Try to take this a little slow. There's a little bit of hills involved in this Gothic Quarter. We're looking at the medieval part of the structure that was probably built over some of the Roman structures at one point. But we're going to kind of go in with an eye towards Roman history today and the old city of Barcino to get an idea of how it was laid out, what's left, if anything's left. There is a temple to Augustus that was put up by Tiberius. So let's go on inside, go back in time, and see what we can find here on Past Access.
Standing tall and proud to welcome tourists is this great facade of the Cathedral of Barcelona. It's no coincidence that this is the spiritual hub of the area. It is said that there was some form of Christian structure here on these very same grounds dating back to the 6th century. Holy ground for sure. But what I really want to send home is this point. There is a ton of wheelchair challenges here in the Gothic Quarter. Still, give it a try, but the crowded alleyways, the steep inclines, the teeth-rattling cobblestones may test the most experienced wheelchair travelers. So take your time and go slow.
Okay, so Gothic Quarter, you got to come up a pretty steep ramp. You can see right behind me. It's not that easy, and it's a little crowded. So what we're going to do is going to keep powering through here. We got a lot of people to maneuver through, but I think we can do it.
We duck into the archway that brings us into the cathedral's cloister. This is a must-stop to take in the power and grandeur of the Catholic Church in Barcelona. There is so much to see here, but navigating down this ramp will test your patience. It really is only one way, and walkers will have to be stopped to allow you to wheel down and back up again. But once inside the cloister courtyard, you see why this must have seemed like a little slice of heaven to the faithful. palm trees line this fountain-fortified courtyard that house some very special feathered friends. About 13 geese call this cloister their home, and they seem to be very famous around here. But let's keep in mind that this is a place of religious introspection and prayer. Back outside on the ancient Gothic streets, you really get a sense that you're in another place and another time. I was on a quest to find these Roman ruins for the show, and was coming up empty. I was completely lost in these alleyways. I was just about ready to give up, until I pushed down this dark street and found a sign. Temple Roma de August. We found it. The ancient Roman ruins of the Temple of Augustus.
Okay, so we're coming down this little alley behind the cathedral, and this is the Temple of Augustus. So let's go on in and see this real quick, okay? This is an enclosed area to keep it safe, but this is pretty much exactly where the Temple of Augustus was built by Tiberius during the Roman era. This would have been, right where we're standing, the most important part of Barcelona, the old town Barcelona. So we're going to walk this way a little bit, okay, and we're going to see that it's in this kind of enclosed area. Now it's gated, and it might be a situation where it's just gated for now, but I think it's protected so that no one can go in and touch it. But if we go a little closer here, you're going to pan over here and see right in here, there's a little bit of the 3 columns you can see right in here. All right, if you come in a little closer, go right inside there, you're going to be able to see and pan up a little bit. There are 3 columns that are left of the temple of Augustus. Augustus being the emperor that gave a lot of money and effort to make Barcelona or Barcino what it was. These columns are over 2,000 years old, and it is something to really kind of take in that this is still left over, and you can still come and see that. As the city built up, tore back down, invaded, conquered, invaded again, this still remains.
The shadows are getting longer as the daylight hours leave us. Yet there's still a lot for us to do and see here in Past Access. How about a flamenco show in the Elborn district? The backdrop is the Palau de las Masas, a Baroque-style building that once housed the Academy of Skeptics in the early 1700s. And by the way, it's wheelchair-friendly.
So one of the things you want to do when you get to Spain is to take in a flamenco show. I think it's one of the things that really makes Spain, Spain. And it's more of an Andalusian thing. It's got a sort of feel to it. If you go to Sevilla, it's really got that sort of stamp to that part of Spain. However, many people have moved here from that part of Spain, and so it caught on. And we're at one of the more premier places here in the Elborn district. And tonight we're going to have a really great show. And I thought it would be great to add to our wonderful trip so far.
The atmosphere is important when selecting a flamenco show in Spain. There are varieties of programs throughout the city, but a close and intimate feel is recommended. The sheer talent of keeping time and footwork of these talented dancers is well worth the price of admission. I especially like the Spanish guitar, the hand-clapping syncopation, and the Moorish-inspired singing. In this art form, you can truly see a mixture of cultures that reflects Spain's blended past. It has been a busy trip so far, and it's time to sit back and take it all in. There is much left to see as we only scratched the surface. So much more that we had to break this episode into 2 parts. We hope you don't mind. Next time on Past Access Part 2 of Barcelona Catalonia Capital. Join me as we conclude our trip to this enthralling city. Past Access will take you above it all along a sky lift from the sea to the heights of Montjuic. we discover the rich naval tradition of the area, dig into the complicated history of the Spanish Civil War and Catalonia's modern-day quest for independence, and finally take it all in beachside along this Mediterranean playground. It's travel, history, and fun, Barcelona style, next time on Past Access. As the sun sets over Barcelona, we conclude our show with a special thanks to the following people and organizations. Remember to stay tuned for Postscript with Pete immediately following this episode.
So here we are in Barcelona wrapping up our time here, and it's been an absolute amazing trip with a lot of different things to see here, and of course the sun setting here and the festive atmosphere is part of the attraction to Barcelona to a lot of people from around the world. So we want to leave you with this last little bit of imagery from Barcelona. We hope you enjoyed the show for Past Access. I'm Pete Coleman saying see you next time.
You have been listening to Past Access with Pete Coleman. For more information on the show or insight to disabled access at historic locations, please visit us at pastaccess.com.
Welcome to Postscript with Pete, the Past Access recap show covering insight on disability travel and further historic context to this episode.
Hello and welcome to Postscript with Pete. I'm Pete Coleman. You just completed watching part 1 of Catalonia Capital here on Past Access, and I really hope you enjoyed it. It was great making this episode. Barcelona is one of the best places I think I've ever been here in Europe, and there's some things that really stick out when you talk about Barcelona, and some of that might have come out in the program or not, so let me kind of fill in the blanks. Barcelona is a place, it's just got this vibrancy about just being what it is and accepting what it is, and that's kind of a confusing subject. And you'll see in part 2 of Catalonia Capital that we're putting together right now that there's a lot of complexities between the identity of Catalonia and their independence movement away from Spain and how they feel about being Spaniards. And what people in Barcelona feel about that altogether. So it's not a cookie cutter situation, but what comes out in the atmosphere as a foreigner to visiting Barcelona in this region is that everything's very vibrant, everything's very alive, and I think that's probably the best word to use here because it's something that really stays with you once you leave Barcelona, that there's an imprint on you, that you want to come back. And it's just not the weather, of course, it's the people, I think. It's the culture that makes it an exciting place to visit, an exciting place to live. And hopefully we can give you that information when you take a look at these videos. So part 1, we talked a lot about the history and the naming of Barcelona. And I really kind of wanted to send home the point about it being the Roman connection. Now, I did have to make a quick historical sort of remedy here because I did talk about the Visigoths coming down to sack the original inhabitants, of course, and then I skipped right ahead to the Franks and then of course the Normanist attacks and the issues with the Ottomans coming in, but I missed altogether the Moors. That was done by mistake, and I apologize for that. So, of course, the Visigoths and then the Moors have such a huge impact on this area, as well as they do for the rest of Spain. You'll see it in the music even today. You'll hear it in the music. You'll see it in some of the architecture. There is that kind of feel that is woven into this very complex tapestry. And that's something that we'll sort of examine a little bit more in part 2. But in this part 1, we looked at some of the Roman architecture, and I am kind of very focused on going after some of the Roman works when I visit a town like Paris, or when I go to other parts of Italy and I see some of the backgrounds about what the Roman Empire had done in this area. That's part of my want when I see an historical background of a city. I want to see some of the real beginnings. For me, the Roman Empire's influence on this area and all the areas throughout the Mediterranean and Europe fascinate me. So if I'm accused for doing a little bit of that too much, I apologize, but that's just who I am when it comes to history podcasts. I just love the Roman Empire when it comes to their influence on things. And so you'll see that in some of our journeys. And in this particular journey, the very first thing I did when I left the hotel was wheel about 3 blocks to go see this first area in this little quiet courtyard with this Roman wall. And just to see that and to touch that wall, to say that this is important and it was left there, really means something to me, that there's still history involved in some of these places and locations. Now, I did also mention that it was pretty hard, and you'll have to have a lot of patience if you're a wheelchair user going to the Gothic Quarter. It is difficult. I think I almost busted my wheelchair up about 2 or 3 times. It's challenging once you get past the front facade of the Cathedral of Barcelona, and you head up basically uphill. And remember, this was a fortified part of the city, and most fortified parts of the city that had some importance were elevated for the areas of being able to defend it. So it's naturally going to be a problem for wheelchairs. The cobblestones, the amount of people, you're really going to have to, if you have someone with you to help you, that's a big help. You're going to need some front pneumatic wheels that are pretty solid, or maybe a free wheel like I used to get over some of the terrain. And even then, it's going to be challenging, but it's so worth it. I was very glad that we found the Temple of Augustus. That was one of the things I had on my list that was a must-do, and I really was a little concerned I wasn't going to find it. But I'm glad we could capture that. I'm sorry for how dark it was. It was late in the day when we filmed this, but you got to see some of it, even if it was behind a gate. You could not walk down it. Well, you could walk down if you could walk, but if you were in a wheelchair, you couldn't get down because of the steps, even if that gate was open, to get a closer look at those columns. And but we did the best we could, and I think we got some good imagery for you from that. I would say that the best part of Barcelona is just taking it easy. I wanted to make sure in this particular episode we had some time dedicated not only to history or to wheelchair travel, but also just to sit at the beach. And you'll see more of that in part 2. But just also get a drink. The vermouth that I had was fantastic. That's not my new summer drink for forever, next to the beer. And that's something we talked about in this episode. I hope that you got a little bit of education on that one. I know I did when I first went there. And the idea that whenever I go to Spain, be it Sevilla or Madrid or going to Oviedo, Barcelona included into that, there's that feel of living and loving life that we kind of miss, especially in the Americas, when it comes to how fast things go in North America. And it's nice to have those siestas. It's nice to have those breaks. And they say, I mentioned that 2 o'clock, usually from 1 to 2 o'clock is the best time for vermouth to take a break and have a nice cold glass right before lunch or right after lunch to talk with friends. And people do that. They actually do it. And it's wonderful to kind of witness that. There is a friendliness about this town that you won't forget. So this is a somewhat abbreviated Postscript show because we will put this out on YouTube, and then we will get, hopefully, a lot of viewer response as we did for the Dresden show that we first put out from episode 1. And from there, we'll read some of your comments, of course. We love your comments. So please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel and remember to send us emails if you can. I also want to be very focused on giving you the information that we have a store. So if you go to our store, you'll see that information right here. And you'll be able to go there and do some shopping. It's a great way to support our show, to help us get to where we need to be from one part of the continent to the next here in Europe and hopefully Asia. And it would be great to go there as well. We do have a trip coming up to Washington, D.C., Baltimore, and my old stomping grounds. And you'll get to see a little bit about the history that's there that represents the United States. So we are kind of going back and forth over the Atlantic on occasion for the Fast Access show. We want to thank everybody at Podcastnik to help put this show together, from the marketing to the information that we need to make our trips happen. And we hope that next time you'll get to see a little bit more about what we do for part 2 of Catalonia Capital here on Past Access. So that'll wrap us here for Postscript with Pete. Until next time, I'm Pete Coleman from Prague saying good night.
This has been Postscript with Pete Coleman. Join us next time for another episode of Past Access, your barrier-free tour through history.